Hey BookTube! I'm the Book Mage, welcome back to my channel and to my best books of 2023. We finally made it to that point in my end of year videos where I get to talk about my favourite books of the year. So I didn't read a huge amount of books this year, so I think I only have 7 books to talk about today. And I feel like it's kind of obvious like which ones are better. Like there's a clear divide between the 4-star books and the 5-star books. But I will say I'm just glad to have some 5-star books. Like before 2023, the last time I got a 5-star read was 2019. So we're just thankful for the 5 stars that we have, okay? So starting off with books that I gave 4 stars, I'm actually going to come in with a bit of like a dark horse here, and it's Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Now I will say this one is on like the bottom of my favourites list, and is it the best thing I've ever read? No. And did it have a lot of, I guess, like issues and plot holes and things? Yes. But also, did I have a fantastically fun time reading this? Yes. Did I fly through this and like binge it in like a day and a half? Yes. This is on my list because I just had such a fun time reading it. I think it was just so like a salty Twitter thread, like maybe like an old gossip site. I never used to read gossip sites, so like I'm not entirely sure, but like reading this just felt like watching something go down on the internet. And I'm not saying we've seen at least 2 things happen at the end of this year and go down on like AuthorTube, Twitter, like the author booktubey kind of space. Honestly, not massively dissimilar to this book. And yeah, this was just pure entertainment. It kind of follows a not very popular white author who, through various ridiculous circumstances, ends up stealing the unpublished, unfinished manuscript of one of her fellow Asian authors. I feel like pretty much everyone who's going to read this has already read it. I didn't really expect to like this one as much as I did. It was just fun. It was just entertaining. It was like watching a train wreck that you couldn't really look away from. The characters in this were horrible, but it was an entertaining, if not slightly stressful, a little bit cringy kind of read. So I appreciated it for what it was. For that, it ends up just squeaking onto my favourites list. My next favourite for this year, coming to you in the form of a glossy PNG, is Ravencry by Ed McDonald. I don't know what I did with the book. I've put a lot of books away, so who knows where it is, but I really enjoyed reading it. So this is the 2nd book in the Ravensmark trilogy, so I actually did read book 2 and book 3 this year, but I feel like book 2 I enjoyed more. The ending to this book, I feel like I just enjoyed it more than book 3. Both were good, but between the two, this one was my highlight. So in book 1, it's a very grimdark, sort of post-apocalyptic fantasy. There are guns and there is technology sort of akin to electricity, but not exactly. And you're following a man named Rialt Galharo as he is in service to this very powerful, sort of godlike being who is one of these things called the Nameless. And they've been in this sort of centuries-long war against these things coming from the other side of the continent called the Deep Kings, who are basically on their way to destroy, enslave, transfigure, what is left of like the remnants of humanity, who are all kind of clinging on around like the edges of this thing called the Misery, which is again like a big post-apocalyptic wasteland of just weird creatures and weird magic and like time and space not really behaving the same. It's a big, horrible, miserable death trap, and it's fantastic. I love it. I love the setting. It's so bleak. It's so horrible. I love it. I have such a good time in this universe. So I can't really say much more about it. Book 2 kind of picks up where book 1 left off. I feel like this one had much more of like a kind of like a film noir type vibe to it. I don't recall if book 1 was like that because it's been many years since I read book 1, but that was the vibe that I got from book 2. I've really enjoyed reading this series. I'm really glad I completed it, but I will just say that book 2 for me felt, I think I rated it higher than book 3. I think book 1 was still my favourite overall, but book 2 is just that perfect place. It does not have middle book syndrome. It has the opposite, where you're still kind of running off the high from book 1, but you're not quite bogged down by the need to like close off the series like book 3. So this felt like a really good, exciting, devastating middle chunk, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave this one like a high 4 stars. It's great. If you're looking for a series that's just bleak, check it out. It's so good. Next on my list of favourites is A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. So this is the prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, but they are standalones. You do not have to read one before the other. It's very easy to just jump into either of them, although they are like 8 and a bit 100 pages, but like it's a good 8 and a bit 100 pages. So I admit I did struggle with this one a little bit because I was in like a bit of a dodgy headspace, so this took me ages to read, and I feel like this maybe could have even had a higher rating and been more enjoyable if I had just had the capacity to enjoy it more. I still don't think it would have been a 5 stars, although I did love where this book went. I loved the sort of, I guess having read Priory first, a lot of this feels like the history. I liked the way that the lore was expanded on, and I almost kind of can't go into it because there's so many. I'm like, how do I start describing like the plot, the synopsis of this, because there are so many different characters, so many different points, and I think you've heard me talk about this before, but it's to say this is super enjoyable. Like, I really like this. There's like a female romance. I really like the large cast of characters. I feel like there weren't any characters that I got individually as attached to as I did in Priory, but I feel like I liked more of the characters, like a wider array of the characters in here. I also just really like the way Samantha Shannon writes in these. She's chosen a particular lexis, I guess. Like, the vocabulary that she's chosen kind of emulates a bit of like the world feel. Does that make sense? So I really enjoyed this one. I definitely would have liked to enjoy it more if my brain would have cooperated. It's like 800 pages of dragons and magic, and like, what's not to like about it? Obviously it was on my favourites list. The next one for which I require an image adding in post is The Broken God by Gareth Hanrahan. I can see this book. It's sat way in the corner, but like the stack of books it's in is piled literally higher than my curtain rail, so I'm not getting it out. This is the third and not yet final book in the Black Iron Legacy. So another one that I can't tell you that much about, but the first book starts off following a band of thieves as they enact this heist, and it goes horribly wrong. The repercussions just sort of snowball, and the individual characters end up caught up in various plots to do with this thing called the God's War, which is going on, where actual literal gods are just warring across the face of the earth. Like, it is exactly as horrific and apocalyptic as you might think it was. This story takes place in kind of like a safe haven, but also not really. It's this weird grimdark city ruled by like a guild of alchemists, and there are like men made of candle wax and weird other alchemical abominations sort of like roaming the streets. It's grimdark, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It was one of my favourite books of the year that I read it, and I've loved reading this series. It's very different to anything else that I've read, and all of the books feel very different to each other. Book 2 is so political. It's literally like an election with canvassing. It's just very unique, and I was really interested to see where book 3 went. I will say I think book 3 is technically like the low point in the series for me, but only because I liked book 1 and book 2 so much. This is still one of the best books that I read this year, and I'm so excited to see where Gareth Hanrahan might take this series in the future. There are so many places we could go, and I like that the story isn't over yet. I like that there's so much more that he can do with it, and I'm just so excited to see what happens. So I can't really say too much about this one. The characters are so different than they were in the first book, and I'm getting quite attached to some of them at this point. And I will say, like, the last line, or the last couple lines of the book, into my feelings. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're gonna have a good time, you're gonna have a bad time, but you're gonna have a good time. And a sad time, but a good time. Okay, so from here, we are finally getting into my 5-star reads of the year. And would you believe me if I told you I'd read 3 5 stars this whole year? I know that that's so not a lot for most people, but like, I had 3 whole years where I didn't read any 5-star books. Just let me have this, okay? Just let me have this. The first of the 5 stars that I'm going to talk about, and I had thought that when I read it, this would be my best book of the year, and I'm shocked that it's been dethroned not once but twice. That's really saying something, because this book was like 5 stars from beginning to end. And fun fact, the last book that I read in 2019, which was my very last 5-star read before like my big 3-year drought, this is the sequel to that book. Which, like, I mean, if anything was going to be a 5 stars and like break the streak, it is Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. This is the second book in the Gentleman Bastard sequence. So yeah, I basically read The Lies of Locke book 1 right at the end of, I'm pretty sure, 2019. No more 5 stars for the next 3 years. And then I read this one in January of this year, and it was just like, it's so 5 stars, guys. It's so 5 stars. It felt so, I'd forgotten what it felt like to read a book that was 5 stars. So again, so much changes between like book 1 and book 2 that I like almost can't talk about this one at all. Book 1 follows Locke Lamora, who is like the head of this band of thieves. It does flip like back and forwards in time quite a lot to his youth in the past and like where he is today. I guess like the main initial plot is that Locke and his like band of merry men, they're kind of like Robin Hood, but if they didn't give to the poor. They're about to pull off like their most complex, biggest like con ever. It's very theatrical, over the top, kind of whimsical, very entertaining. And then at the same time, there's like this, it's kind of set in like a fantastical like criminal underworld. So there's all this like gang stuff going on in the background, and then the story just, I don't want to say exactly, but the story just branches out into so many different overlapping plot lines that it's kind of like, it's a wild ride from start to finish, trying to keep hold of them all, and every time you feel like you're following one plot line, another one comes in and just takes over, and it's just like the most amazingly written. I still feel like book one is possibly the, like, plot-wise, like point to point and like event to event, I think it might be like the most well plotted, masterfully crafted, like best written in that sense book that I think I've ever read to date. So this had so much to live up to, and I think it did. I definitely didn't like it as much as book one, but like book one is an experience in itself. This picks up pretty much exactly where the first one left off. Because of that, I so cannot say very much about this. I just really loved the writing, I love the characters, I love that this is continuing to like build on those characters, and I suppose I didn't necessarily expect the plot to sort of like take the direction that it did. I still had such a fantastic time reading this and enjoying this, and while I can't say it was like as masterfully crafted as book one, this is still so easily like 5-star quality. Like from the moment I picked it up, I was just like, you can just tell sometimes when you're reading a really good book, and I could just feel it. I loved this. I'm so glad that I finally continued on with this series. I know that I only have 2 more books that are out at the moment, and then the rest are like, who knows when they're coming. So it is one that I'm kind of trying to savor, because I feel like this series has potential to all be 5 stars for me. This was just such a fun, entertaining book with characters that I'm like, the characters are like really the strong point of particularly this entry. I really like how they're growing. I really like realistic they feel, how 3-dimensional they feel, and I'm so excited to see where this series goes. Not necessarily enough to jump into it immediately, because I feel like I want to kind of savor them so I don't end up with none left to read. Yeah, this instant favourite. Like, it was so good. It was so good. This is 3rd place for potential best book of the year. If the next 2 books had not been read, this would have easily taken that spot. I'm kind of shocked that anything dethroned it, but I just think the next 2 books really earned their spot above this one. So this is kind of awkward, because my 2nd best book of the year is not one that I've talked about on my channel, I think. I have only just read this book in December, so it's not been in any vlogs, I have not done TBRs, it's not been in any of my wrap-ups because I have not filmed that yet. Spoilers for my December wrap-up that'll come in January, because I can't believe I read another 5-star book before the end of the year. I knew this book was going to be good, I had such high hopes for it, but this book, oh, I can't even believe how good this was. It is The Tyranny of Faith by Richard Swan. This is book 2 in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. Book 1 is The Justice of Kings, and that was a book that I read last year, and I really liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars. I liked the world building. That book, the general premise is you're following a justice who is kind of like a magical lawman. He's literally basically like judge, jury and executioner, but he has magical powers and basically travels around this ever expanding empire, basically passing the justice of the law among like the empire's denizens. He's also accompanied by his clerk, who the story is like told from her perspective. Quite near the start of book 1, they end up sort of trying to solve this kind of like a murder mystery. The wife of like one of the nobles has been murdered, like her body's been discovered in very strange circumstances, and it's up to them to figure out what is going on, and it obviously leads them down this rabbit hole that expands into like this wild plot with much bigger ramifications than just the murder of one woman. More than that, I don't really want to say. It is really fantastic. It's kind of like part murder mystery investigation, a little bit of like the author is a lawyer, and you can really tell that, or he was a lawyer. There's a little bit of like courtroom procedural going on there. The justice has magical powers, so like different justices have different powers, but they can all force people to tell the truth or like to speak to the dead. Some of them can speak to or like commune with animals. There are various different powers that they might have to help them uphold the law by like magical means, I guess. I could just tell, like when I read book 1, the murder mystery part of it was kind of, it was a good tool to like get the story moving and like provide plot reasons for the characters to basically be involved with like the main plot, I guess. But the actual murder mystery part itself and like a lot of the events that happen in this town were not necessarily my favourite part of book 1. I still really enjoyed it. I gave it like a high or a mid 4 stars. So it was a really good book, but there were little bits there, like I could so tell this book had places to go and that I wanted to go to them. There's this, like the magic system and sort of like strange old religion, and just the way that like magic and like specifically like speaking to the dead and stuff work in this book. So much of the start of book one gave me like, if you've ever played Dragon Age Origins, if you've been to Haven, I got so much of that vibes from like some of the opening scenes of the book. And then other parts of it give me like Mages in the Fade type vibes. Like it just, I was just getting like little inklings that reminded me of other things that I really liked, and I could tell that this book had places to go, that this series was going to go places, and it went. Oh, it went to those places. It went so much to the places that I wanted it to go. I started reading this, and like halfway through I was still convinced that this could be a 5 stars, but that it was at least a 4 stars. But like the way that Richard Swan writes, like his actual writing style and like the words, the lexis that he chooses to use are so in the same way that I really like how Samantha Shannon writes. Again, this just feels so, the vocabulary sort of just feels like it fits with this world, and I really like when books do that. And so this was just a pleasure to read. Just the writing, just like the turns of phrase, just like the dialogue between the characters. I really liked the relationship between some of the characters in here. I like that everyone is in such different places from book one. It's so wildly different. Like they feel like the same characters, but they're so changed. Like I love the change that this series is really putting the characters, the world, the plot, everything. It's just fantastic, and like I so can't wait to see where this series is going to go. I think the last book comes out like really early next year. I'm so ready for it. I am so ready for it. Goldsborough better do a special edition to match the first and second one. If they don't, I'll be so mad. There was just a point in this book where I just knew, like, I was just enjoying this book so much. It was just such a pleasure to read, so entertaining. And this it's weird because like I like books and I read a lot and I enjoy reading, but sometimes, especially having ADHD, it's really hard sometimes to just sit down and always want to pick up a book. I read all of this in like maybe like 3 days, I think. It's not that it was difficult to put down. I could put the book down at the end of a chapter if I wanted to like go away, but I immediately wanted to just come back and pick it up again. Like every part of me was like, whenever I had a second spare, like if I was on my lunch break, if I finish work, when I wake up, I'm like, I just want to pick this up and read. And at no point did I get tired of reading. Like I just wanted to keep reading and reading and reading, and it's so rare that I still get that from a book. Everything about this was just the most like, I mean some of the scenes in here were not wonderful, but like reading this was just such a wonderful experience. And I also learned that the author is from Yorkshire, so like Yorkshire, I mean fair enough, he's from North Yorkshire and I'm from West Yorkshire, but still. I love everything about this. I love the world so much. I love the setting. I love everything about it. Like I wish we could get 100 books set in this universe. I think the 3rd one is going to be the last one, but like if there were ever tie-in novels or novellas, I'm begging. Literally anything else, I will. I love it. I love everything about this. Having read this book, there was just a point where I was like, every single bit that I'm reading, I'm like, is so good. It just has to be 5 stars. And I got to the end of it and I was like, it's so 5 stars. It's cemented itself as one of my now favorite fantasy series. And like, I know it's a trilogy, I just wish it could be like 1,000 books long, because I would read thousands of books in this setting. I love it. I love it. And you might be thinking, like, how am I saying all this and there's still a book that I still think I'm gonna rank like even higher on my favorites list than this book? And it was tough. Like I did have to really think about it, because I think I might have like some recency bias with this, because again, I have just finished it. But when I think back to how I felt about this and how I felt about my #1 book, it was very similar, but I just feel like my #1 book, it did a lot of this but just a little bit more. But yeah, if you haven't read this series, if you've not picked up the Justice of Kings yet, like I know a lot of people might go into it and not necessarily enjoy the murder mystery part of it, but you just have to understand that that is a device to get you to where you need to be. And if that was what you didn't like about book 1, please give book 2 a go, because book 2, it moves on. Like there's so much moving, there's so much expansion. It's just fantastic. I love everything about this. 5 stars. I love everything about this. Please read it. But yeah, my #1 book, some of you will know what it is already because I've definitely ranted at length about it before, but it is Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. Now I really did sit and think between book 2 and book 1, but the thing is, I had a lot of similar feelings. Like when you just read part of this and you're just like, oh, I'm loving this, it's 5 stars. I think I knew sooner that this book was 5-star quality, and I really think this book had such an extra leg up in that it is the payoff to like the whole trilogy. It definitely had like more going for it. And while reading this book as well, there were scenes that made me laugh, shocked me, and like it's so hard to get a genuine reaction out of me for anything, for any book. Like I actually had to go downstairs, like, pause reading this, go downstairs in the middle of the night to talk to a family member to try and explain to them the scene I had just read and how much it was just affecting me. I was like, I need you to listen to me rant. They've not read this series, they don't read like they don't read fantasy, they don't read fiction, but I like how often does a book make me go drag someone out of their own daily life and say, sit down, you need to listen to me rant for the next 20 minutes about something I just read in a book. Last Argument of Kings. So I really don't know what to say about this series. I feel like myself as well as others have quite a hard time summarising the plot, but basically book one follows the points of view of several different characters. There's like a fencing champion, a torturer, an infamous Northman, and it's their stories as they all sort of come to converge in the same place. There is war brewing on multiple fronts, like around this union, I think they call it, and at the same time this sort of figure from legend, this ancient mage, is coming back to sort of like the heart of civilization, the seat of the union, to sort of reclaim his position on the council after many years of being away, to the point where people kind of forgot that he was real. And it's all of these things sort of converging, and book one is literally like setting up a chessboard. Book two is kind of like maybe like the opening moves, and book three is all the payoff. Book three is just all payoff after payoff after payoff. We spent 2 whole books getting these characters exactly where they needed to be, to just have it was kind of like when you see like those domino videos, I was like, how much more shit can I see go down in this book? I'd given the first 2 books in this series like a 4 stars because I enjoyed them. The writing was good, the characterization is fantastic. Joe Abercrombie is like a master of characters and dialogue and interpersonal relationships and sort of like that witty grimdark. I feel like the things that were missing from books 1 and 2 that, you know, I didn't really give them that 5 stars. I didn't have like enough emotional investment. Well, I feel like by this book I was emotionally invested enough, and just some of the things that happen in this book to characters in this book, it's like it's that thing where you feel like, what's the worst thing I could do to this person? And then it's like, actually there's another level above that. And that's where we're going. And there were scenes where you've just been waiting for payoff of things for so long, sometimes since like book 1, and when you finally got the payoff in this book, it was just like the catharsis, just the release of tension of how much I'd been waiting for things to go down and they're finally going down. Like, it was such a joy to a grim dark joy, but such a joy to see all this finally play out and finally see how this trilogy was finally going to wrap up. And all it did was make me so sure that I'm just going to love the rest of the books in the First Law universe. It just made me so sure that like all the work that I'd put in reading books 1 and book 2, while they were still good, like this, it just made it so worth it. And I love this book. And if there is ever a series where I'm like, look, you have to read them, you kind of have to read them all as one book. If you just read book 1, 2 and 3 as one very long book, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Yeah, just for me, this being the culmination of a series, and the fact that it had like I literally couldn't sit still. I had to get up and go downstairs and rant and just be somewhere else and be very animated just about how much I was enjoying this and just how much it was getting to me. And I was like, look, it has to be my #1 book of the year, right? It was just excellently done. It was just wonderful. While I could see a lot of like where this book was going to go, where we were going to end up, where characters were going to end up, I just feel like the joy was in seeing it happen. It did not spoil my enjoyment of it. Just like so many books rely on the reveal being the thing that makes it worth it, but not this. This was so much about the journey of getting there, and I feel like this trilogy is a book of journeys, because like it was a lot to get to this point, but once we were here, it's so good. I'm just so, I don't know, impressed by this series. Like, I love it so much, and I'm so glad that there are so many more books for me to go on to. Like, I feel like every single page in here is just paying off something that was set up in a previous book or in an earlier scene, or in the brief moments of levity that you get, and like the character development, and just, it's just such a good book. This is just such a good, solid 5-star read. Yeah, I'm quite happy to say that this is my best book of the year, my #1 book of 2023. Some very close competition from like books 2 and 3, I'll be honest, but like honestly, having 3 5-star reads that it's really hard for me to decide which one I like the best. What a good place to be in. Like, what a nice spot to be in. There's a reason I haven't done like my favourite books of the year for some previous years, because there just haven't been 5-star books. So what a pleasure to say that I've had 3 fantastic, like, just powerhouse reads this year, honestly. Like, these 3 books, I know you can't, if I do this, these 3 books, absolutely making the year of 2023 for me. I feel like these being 5 stars sit so head and shoulders above like all the other books on this list, every other book that I've read this year, every other book that I've read since the end of 2019. So that is the end of my rundown of the best books that I read this year, and hopefully I've given you guys some, maybe some nice fodder for your TBR, maybe some nice books to add to your 2024 reading goals. I feel like everyone already knows about First Law and Gentleman Bastards, but like if you've not read Empire of the Wolf, do a Yorkshire Girl a favour and like pick it up. So hopefully you found this entertaining, and hopefully I didn't like rant too long. It's good to rant about good books though. Like I get to do it so rarely. Just let me have this. So if you did make it this far, leave me like a little glittery heart emoji, because like I'm just so ooh about these books. I'm just so like, oh, I just love them so much. Also let me know, what was your best read of this year? Like, what is your book of 2023? So with that said, I'm now going to go. This kind of wraps up like the last of my kind of end of year videos. I do have like some start of year videos and obviously like my little blooper reel, but otherwise this is pretty much like the end of 2023. I hope you guys have had a fantastic year. I feel like aside from these 3 books, like I would have had a mediocre year, but these 3 books really coming in clutch. But yeah, I hope you guys all have a fantastic end to 2023, a fantastic start to next year. I wish for you only the best of reading experiences, and hopefully I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!